Do you know how a little girl, born into nobility in a restless Italy, walked away from comfort and chose silence, prayer, and God instead? How did that hidden child become a wonder of her age, a woman of visions, miracles, suffering, and a holiness that outlived death itself? This is the story of Saint Agnes of Montepulciano, a soul who chose God above all, and through silence became a light that still shines across centuries. Chapter 1. The world she was born into and her childhood. In the 13th century, Italy was marked by conflict and change. City-states like Siena, Florence, and Orvieto struggled for power, creating a restless society. Yet in the midst of this instability, religious life flourished. Many were drawn to prayer and consecration, seeking God as the true source of peace. It was a time when holiness quietly rose in response to the wounds of the world. Agnes was born in 1268 inches, Gratiano, near Montepulciano, within the Papal States. She came from the noble Segni family, known for both their status and their sincere Catholic faith. From her earliest days, she was surrounded by a home where belief in God was not only taught, but lived. This environment gently prepared her heart for something greater that God had already begun within her. Yet Agnes was never captivated by the privileges of her noble birth. While others might have delighted in comfort and celebration, she seemed drawn to something unseen. There was a quiet seriousness about her, a peace that did not depend on the world around her. Even as a child, her heart leaned toward God, as if she already understood that true joy could not be found in earthly things. She often chose silence over play, seeking moments alone to pray. While other children filled their days with games, Agnes would withdraw to speak with God in her own simple way. These were not habits imposed on her, but a natural expression of her soul. In that quiet, she began to form a deep relationship with the Lord, one that would shape every step of her life. Her parents soon realized that their daughter was different. There was a depth in her faith and a maturity in her choices that seemed far beyond her age. She was not merely following rules, she was responding to a call. Though they loved her dearly, they began to sense that her life might not belong to them alone, but to God who was guiding her gently. At the age of 9, Agnes made a remarkable request. With a calm and determined heart, she asked to enter the convent. For a child of noble birth, this was an unexpected path. Yet her desire was clear. She wanted to give her whole life to God. It was not a passing feeling, but a deep conviction that had been growing within her for years. Such a decision required special permission, as she was far younger than the usual age. Still, the Church recognized something extraordinary in her vocation. Agnes was allowed to enter religious life, marking the true beginning of her journey. What seemed like a quiet step would become the foundation of a life of holiness, where grace would unfold in ways no one could yet imagine. Chapter 2. Entering religious life and spiritual foundations. Agnes entered a small community of women living according to the Franciscan spirit, often called the Sisters of the Sack. Their way of life was simple and demanding, rooted in poverty, penance, and prayer. For a child of noble birth, this was a radical step. Yet for Agnes, it felt like coming home, as if her soul had long been prepared for this hidden and sacred path. The sisters wore rough garments made of coarse fabric, a visible sign of their commitment to poverty. Their days were structured around prayer, silence, and humble work. There was little comfort, little distraction, and no place for vanity. Everything pointed toward God. In this quiet and disciplined environment, Agnes learned to detach from the world and to anchor her heart in what truly endures. Remarkably, Agnes adapted quickly to this demanding life. What seemed difficult to others became natural to her. She embraced fasting, long hours of prayer, and acts of penance with a quiet joy. Rather than resisting sacrifice, she entered into it willingly. Her young age did not weaken her resolve. Instead, it revealed a grace at work within her, guiding her beyond ordinary strength. Obedience became one of the defining marks of her spiritual life. Agnes did not seek attention or recognition, nor did she desire any special treatment because of her age. She listened, followed, and served with sincerity. In the hidden rhythm of daily life, she chose humility again and again. It was in these unseen acts that her love for God deepened, shaping her soul in silence. As the days passed, her interior life grew steadily. Agnes developed a deep habit of contemplation, often withdrawing into silent prayer, even in the midst of community life. Her relationship with God was not built on words alone, but on a quiet awareness of His presence. In that stillness, she learned to rest in Him, allowing grace to transform her from within. The other sisters began to notice something unique about her. There was a peace in her, a gentle authority that did not come from age or position. Her prayer seemed to carry a depth that touched those around her. Without seeking it, she became a quiet example for the community. Many sensed that God was forming something extraordinary within her young and faithful heart. This early period of her life became the foundation for everything that followed. The discipline, humility, and deep prayer she embraced would sustain her in future responsibilities and trials. What was hidden in these early years would later bear visible fruit. In the silence of the convent, Agnes was being shaped not for herself alone, but for a mission that would one day touch many souls. Chapter 3. The Mission in Proceno and Growth in Responsibility. In 1281, Agnes was chosen among a small group of sisters to travel to Proceno and establish a new convent. It was a significant moment, not only for the community, but for Agnes herself. Though still very young, she was entrusted with a mission that required courage and faith. Leaving behind what was familiar, she stepped into the unknown, guided only by her trust in God. Proceno was not yet a place firmly rooted in religious life. The foundations had to be built from the beginning, both physically and spiritually. The sisters faced uncertainty, limited resources, and the challenge of forming a stable community. It was a mission that demanded sacrifice, patience, and perseverance. For Agnes, this was not a burden, but an invitation to give more of herself in service to God. At just 14 years old, Agnes was given the responsibility of managing the finances of the new convent. It was an extraordinary trust placed in someone so young. Resources were scarce, and every decision mattered. Yet Agnes accepted this duty with humility, recognizing it not as an honor, but as a service entrusted to her by God through her superiors. She carried out her responsibilities with remarkable wisdom and clarity. Agnes managed the limited resources carefully, ensuring that nothing was wasted and that the needs of the community were met. Her decisions were guided not by personal preference, but by discernment and prayer. In all things, she sought to act with honesty and simplicity, reflecting a heart aligned with God's will. But her contribution did not stop at material concerns. Agnes also played a vital role in shaping the spiritual life of the community. Through her example of prayer, silence, and devotion, she helped create an atmosphere centered on God. The sisters were strengthened not only by her leadership, but by the quiet witness of her life, which spoke more powerfully than words. As time passed, her maturity became increasingly evident. The other sisters began to rely on her, not because she sought authority, but because her actions revealed wisdom and stability. There was a sense of peace in her presence, a trustworthiness that drew others to her. Though young in years, she carried herself with a depth that inspired confidence and unity. It was in Proceno that Agnes learned the true meaning of leadership, not through control or command, but through prayer, sacrifice, and service. Here, her hidden virtues were tested and strengthened. This mission became a turning point in her life, shaping her into a leader who would guide others not by force, but by the quiet strength of a soul deeply rooted in God. Chapter 4. A young prioress and a life centered on the Eucharist. In 1288, at only 20 years old, Agnes was elected prioress of the convent in Proceno. It was an unexpected choice, one that surprised many both inside and outside the community. Yet those who lived with her understood why. They had witnessed her humility, her wisdom, and her deep union with God. What seemed unusual to the world was, in truth, a quiet recognition of grace already at work. For someone so young to be entrusted with such responsibility was rare. In a time when age often determined authority, Agnes stood as an exception. Her election was not based on experience in years, but on the depth of her spiritual life. The sisters recognized in her a clarity of heart and a steadfast faith that made her capable of guiding others, not by strength, but by holiness. Agnes did not lead through commands or authority imposed from above. Instead, she governed through example. Her life of prayer, her gentleness, and her consistency became the true foundation of her leadership. She listened more than she spoke, and when she spoke, her words carried weight because they were rooted in silence. In this way, she led not by force, but by presence. At the center of her life, and the life of the community, was the Eucharist. Agnes had a deep love for Christ, present in the Blessed Sacrament. She encouraged the sisters to approach the altar not out of routine, but with devotion and longing. For her, the Eucharist was not simply a ritual, but a living encounter. It was there that she found strength, guidance, and peace. Under her care, the community began to change. The rhythm of prayer deepened, and a spirit of unity grew among the sisters. Conflicts softened, distractions faded, and a renewed focus on God took root. Agnes did not impose this transformation. She nurtured it gently, allowing grace to work through her example. The convent became a place where silence spoke and God was truly sought. As this transformation unfolded, word of Agnes began to spread beyond the walls of the convent. People from nearby towns heard of the young prioress whose life reflected something beyond the ordinary. They spoke of her wisdom, her peace, and her closeness to God. Without seeking recognition, Agnes became known as someone whose life pointed clearly toward the divine. Soon, people began to come to her, not only out of curiosity, but in search of guidance. They brought their struggles, their doubts, and their hopes. Agnes welcomed them with the same humility she showed her sisters. She did not offer complex answers, but a listening heart and a faith rooted in God. In her presence, many found clarity, as if her life itself was a quiet invitation to trust. Chapter 5. Visions, Miracles, and a Light for the World. As Agnes grew deeper in her life of prayer, she was granted extraordinary spiritual gifts. Among them were visions that drew her beyond the visible world. She experienced moments in which heaven seemed near, and she was especially devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary. These encounters were not for her own comfort, but signs of a soul being gently formed and guided by God. These mystical experiences did not distance her from reality. Instead, they strengthened her faith and deepened her trust. In silence, she learned to surrender more fully to God's will. Her contemplation became more profound, not marked by emotion alone, but by a steady and faithful presence before God. What she received in prayer quietly transformed the way she lived, spoke, and served others each day. Alongside these visions, many began to witness signs that could not be explained naturally. People who were sick came to Agnes seeking prayer, and some returned healed in body or in mind. These events spread quickly, not because Agnes sought attention, but because those who experienced them could not remain silent. Her life became a place where others encountered the healing presence of God. There were also moments that echoed the miracles of the gospel. On certain occasions, food that seemed insufficient was multiplied, providing for the needs of many. These acts were simple, almost hidden, yet deeply meaningful. They pointed not to Agnes herself, but to the power of God, working through a humble servant. In her hands, scarcity became abundance, reflecting divine generosity. As news of these events spread, people began to travel from distant places to see her. They came with burdens, questions, and hopes they could not carry alone. Agnes received them not as a figure of importance, but as a sister in faith. She listened patiently, prayed with them, and guided them gently. In her presence, many felt a peace that words could not fully explain. Her influence soon reached beyond individuals to the wider community. In a time marked by division, she was often asked to bring peace between families and rival groups. Agnes approached these conflicts with humility and prayer, seeking not to judge but to reconcile. Her presence alone often softened hearts, reminding people of a greater truth that stood above their disputes. In this way, Agnes became more than a prioress or a mystic. She became a living sign of God's mercy in a troubled world. Through her visions, her miracles, and her quiet service, she revealed that God was still present and active among his people. In a time of unrest, her life offered something rare and precious, a witness that grace could still heal, unite, and restore. Chapter 6. The Final Years and a Holy Death. In 1306, Agnes was called back to Montepulciano, the place of her birth, to lead the convent there. It was a return not to comfort, but to responsibility. The community needed guidance, and Agnes, now matured through years of prayer and service, accepted this mission with quiet obedience. Once again, she placed herself entirely at the service of God, ready to give whatever was asked of her. During this time, Agnes experienced a profound vision of Dominic Guzman. This encounter left a deep impression on her soul and marked a turning point in the life of the community. She discerned that God was inviting them into a new spiritual path, one that would shape their identity and mission more clearly in the years to come. Guided by this vision, Agnes led the convent to embrace the rule of Saint Augustine and the spirituality of the Dominican order. This shift was not merely structural, but deeply spiritual. It called the sisters to a life rooted in truth, contemplation, and the sharing of God's word. Agnes helped them understand that prayer and mission were not separate, but united in the love of Christ. Moved by another inner inspiration, Agnes also undertook the building of a church dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. This was not an act of ambition, but of devotion. She believed that honoring Mary would draw souls closer to her Son. Despite limited means, the project moved forward, sustained by faith. The church became a visible sign of her love for God and his mother. Yet as her spiritual influence grew, her body began to weaken. Agnes suffered from long periods of illness that gradually drained her strength. The one through whom many had received healing now carried her own hidden suffering. She did not resist this cross, but accepted it with patience, offering her pain in union with Christ. In her weakness, her faith shone even more clearly. At the advice of others, she was taken to the thermal baths of Cianciano Terme, known for their healing properties. Many who went there found relief, but Agnes did not. Her condition continued to decline. This too she accepted without complaint. She who had been an instrument of healing for others was now called to witness through her own unhealed suffering. On the 20th of April 1317, Agnes passed from this world in peace. Her death was not marked by fear, but by quiet surrender. Having given her life fully to God, she now returned to him. In her final moments, she was united with the suffering of Christ, embracing the cross to the end. Her life, shaped by prayer and sacrifice, found its completion in a holy and faithful death. Chapter 7. Canonization, Veneration, and Spiritual Legacy. After Agnes passed from this world, something remarkable was noticed by those around her. Her body was said to emit a gentle and sweet fragrance, unlike anything natural. In the tradition of the Church, this was often seen as a sign of holiness, a quiet testimony that her life had been pleasing to God. Even in death, there seemed to be a lingering presence of grace surrounding her. As time went on, another extraordinary detail became clear. Her body did not undergo the normal process of decay. Instead, it remained preserved in a way that astonished those who saw it. This incorruptibility was not understood as a miracle for its own sake, but as a sign pointing beyond itself toward a life deeply united with God, now reflected even in the stillness of her remains. Very soon, her tomb became a place of prayer and pilgrimage. People from nearby towns and distant regions came to visit, not out of curiosity alone, but with faith. They came seeking comfort, healing, and the quiet strength that her life continued to inspire. Many left with a renewed sense of hope, as if her presence still spoke, gently leading them closer to God. Her life and virtues did not remain only in memory, but were carefully recorded. Raymond of Capua, a respected Dominican, wrote about her holiness, preserving the story of her faith for future generations. Through these writings, her witness reached far beyond her time, allowing others to encounter the depth of her spiritual life. Among those deeply touched by her example was Catherine of Siena. She spoke of Agnes with great reverence, calling her our glorious mother. This title reflected not only admiration, but a recognition of spiritual motherhood. Agnes had become a guide, a quiet light for those seeking God, even for saints who would come after her. In 1726, the Church formally recognized her holiness when she was canonized by Pope Benedict XIII. This declaration did not make her a saint, but affirmed what many had already believed for centuries. Her life was held up as an example for all the faithful, a reminder that holiness is possible in every age through grace and faithful surrender. The legacy of Agnes remains alive in the Church today. Her life speaks of deep contemplation, a profound love for the Eucharist, and a willingness to embrace suffering in union with Christ. She reminds us that true greatness is found not in recognition, but in hidden fidelity. Through her witness, we are invited to trust that even in silence and sacrifice, God is at work, shaping souls for eternity. Chapter 8. A Prayer to Saint Agnes of Montepulciano. O Saint Agnes, who chose God from your earliest years with a heart so pure and faithful, teach us to recognize His gentle call in our own lives. Help us to respond with courage, even when the path seems uncertain, trusting that true joy is found not in the world, but in giving ourselves completely to Him. Teach us, dear Saint Agnes, to seek God in silence and in prayer. In a world filled with noise and distraction, guide us back to the quiet where His voice can be heard. Help us to value stillness, to listen with open hearts, and to discover the peace that comes from resting in His loving presence. Help us remain faithful to our vocation each day, even in the small and hidden moments. When we feel weak or discouraged, remind us that holiness is built through perseverance. Strengthen our hearts so that we may continue to follow God with trust, knowing that every act of fidelity, no matter how small, has eternal value in His eyes. Intercede for those who are suffering in body or spirit, especially the sick and the discouraged. You, who were an instrument of God's healing, pray that they may find comfort and hope. May they feel God's closeness in their pain, and may their hearts be lifted by the assurance that they are never alone in their trials. Teach us to accept suffering with faith, as you did in your final years. When we face difficulties, help us not to turn away, but to unite them with the cross of Christ. May we learn to see suffering not as a burden without meaning, but as a path through which God draws us closer to his redeeming love. Guide us to live in humility and to grow in love for the Eucharist. Like you, may we recognize Christ truly present and approach him with reverence and devotion. Form in us a heart that does not seek recognition, but desires only to love and serve. In this hidden life, may we find the grace that transforms us from within. O Saint Agnes, faithful servant of God, pray for us as we walk our journey of faith. Help us to remain steadfast in hope, firm in love, and trusting in God's providence. May your example inspire us to seek holiness in our daily lives until the day we are called to share in the eternal joy of heaven. Amen.